name's Christian Shoemate, and today I'm going to be doing my presentation on international comparisons when we're talking about testing among the different countries. Specifically, I'm going to be going over my reading of chapter 12 of Setting the Record Straight by Gerald Bracy. But I'm just going to be going over that and some of the information from this book and, this chapter and how it relates to our modern day, what exactly Bracy is covering. But let's go ahead and get into it. So this is my overview. First of all, I'm going to provide context for these international scores, exactly what these tests are, and how they are utilized when we're analyzing American students and international students' test scores. We're also going to talk about the myth because it's a little bit of a gray area of America's inability to take a test. That's a little bit of witty wordplay on my end. And it's just going to be covering how do American students fare in comparison to other countries and how the results may provide a false image, which that'll tie into our current event a little bit as well as the reflection. Um, and then also, I will be looking at the usage of this reading within the context of today, because it is important to note that Setting the Record Straight was written in 2004, so quite a bit has changed. So I took a look at some research to see, how it has changed over time. Now, first, I want to get into some phrases I'll be going into, specifically the studies that are cited by Bracy. First of all, we have the Third International Mathematics and Science Study, specifically 1996 to 2000. It's a mathematics and science test for grades 4 and 8. Specifically, there's going to be the usage of the word 10-year-old and 14-year-old, which I guess at the time was grades 4 and 8. Right now, I'm doing my student teaching for 5th grade, and a lot of the students in that age bracket is about 10. So it's changed a little bit since then. But this specific study has been done every 4 years since 1995. The other one is the Program of International Student Assessment, which was conducted by the IEA, which I think is an educational organization who kind of takes a look at this data. But they ran the PISA in 2001, which just it's a study that conducts every 3 years that measures reading ability, math, and science literacy, and other key skills among 15-year-olds in dozens of developed and developing countries. It's also important to note, I believe it was this, they also analyzed 10-year-olds at one point. He also takes a look at progress in international reading literacy, which was done in 2003. And he also cites the PISA and poverty study, which comes at sort of like a footnote type part in the chapter. However, the chapter is only about 6 to 5 pages long, so it's not a very long chapter, but anyway, so here's some of the testing data. American students, in 2003, they actually scored above average in math, both with the TIMSS, as well as the PISA. However, they did a secondary report, which was once, seniors and high school demographics, it appeared closer to the bottom. However, when we look at an interpretation of this data, we see that TIMSS and other tests like it use percent correct scoring rather than scale scoring. So this means that outliers and other small differences make big changes on American results. Bracy also notes that subtle changes can make a difference in the actual testing, and he makes a pretty good analogy with this. So, when I'm just going to call them Tim's tests, when those were going on, it would be all across of America, and there would be like a few outliers. So like, students who get like a perfect 100 or students who get like a complete 0. Those sort of outliers are very small. However, they tend to make up a big part of the actual scoring. Now, he compares this to like a runner in the Olympics. If it was an 8-person run, that if the person in last place just walked the entire thing, people would see that as he would still be the 8th fastest man in the world. But anyway, this goes into the myth that I was talking about earlier. Bracy cites a 1991 study in which 10-year-old and 14-year-old students, so this is the TIMS test, I believe, were tested across 31 countries. He notes that depending on the country and the language, the passages presented may have more difficult to understand. Now, what this is talking about, there's a particular part in the chapter in which he is going over the test scores, and there's a big discrepancy with how the actual test and how the passages were given out. So, like in Hong Kong, which is a territory of Britain, I believe, the tests were given out in English. And American students, it was also given out in English. However, countries like Singapore and like Brazil, countries like that, it was more to their native language, like Portuguese or um, what may have you, depending on the country. But the results from this study showed that 10-year-old American students ranked second across the participating countries, whilst the 14-year-old American students ranked in 8th place. However, Bracing notes that the outliers within the study made a big difference in the results of the study compared to the results of a similar TIM study conducted during the same time. So this was actually the PISA. Um, but anyways, so we're gonna look at the oh, sorry, this is part of the whatchamacallit, the PowerPoint template that I used. But as for the other studies that he sourced, the IEA, they actually conducted a 2001 study, which is primarily in reading and literacy. Bracey notes another study in which only 10-year-olds were tested across 35 countries. Bracey states that while American students placed ninth, only 3 countries had significantly higher test scores. He notes that the tests were composed of prose and information items. This is important to note because he does make it apparent, and he does make a note that there is a belief, and I think it's backed up by some research, that American education tends to focus quite a bit on literature rather than, like, document of prose data. Bracey elaborates on the idea that the PIRLS are more spread out than the TIMS and the earlier 1991 study. So it's just kind of going over some of the scoring discrepancies. Um, Bracy also notes that there was a lot more countries involved in the 2001 study compared to the 1991 study. This is pretty interesting, but it's just a little footnote. Um, as for the summary, Bracy's overall outlook, Bracy actually opens the chapter with the advice that when posed with people saying that American kids just can't keep up with their international peers, they should mention that students do average to well above on test scores, and as we've read in this chapter, the evidence does back it up. Now, there's an interesting underlying theme that it's touched on a little bit, but the thing about this book, there's a lot of mention of socioeconomic dynamics and how they play a part in both education and how we perceive education. So this notes Bracy briefly mentions that American students in schools with fewer than 25% of the students living in poverty outscored the highest nation. He also goes to state that even with 50% not living in poverty, the test scores in the United States are still really, really good. Um, but we can see how this applies now. This is the reflection part, specifically when looking at the PISA and TIM scores today. I found an article from 2017, which is pretty recent. It's not as recent as it could be, but when looking at studies, it's pretty recent. However, this article stated that Pew Research Center had reported that U.S. students had ranked 38th in math and 28th in science on the TIMSS test, whilst U.S. students ranked 30th in math and 19th in science. So now what we can see with that is we can take the information that we have obtained from Bracy's work and we can look at it and kind of understand that there may be some variables at play that not necessarily relate, like the outliers that Bracy did mention, when comparing those TIMS scores from the early 2000s. Another thing that I noted, I read an article about online scoring and how it affects different countries. The article was written in 2019, and it didn't necessarily go over TIMS or PISA data, so I didn't feel the need to list it here. However, it's important when we're intaking this information from the chapter to look at it and wonder how it will be affecting both online learning, how learning has changed both face to face and online regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. But that's just some food for thought. Um, these are my sources. Um, the different studies that I sourced. The one PISA in poverty, that's the one where it gets the statistic for the 25% and the 50%. The reading, of course, is the Setting the Record Straight by Bracy. And then the article I sourced was the Drew D. Silver U.S. students' academic achievement still lags that of their peers in many other countries. And it's by Pew Research Center, specifically their short reads series. But anyway, my name's Christian. Thank you for watching this. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to put them down in the comments or the comments of the discussion post. I'm about to edit this video, so anyway, I hope I did all right. But yeah, bon voyage.